It's someone who goes against the grain, doesn't listen to the conventional wisdom, the person who, when they make an opinion about a piece of art and then listens to an expert give their opinion, doesn't let the expert's opinion affect their opinion. So that's the definition of contrarian. I know everyone on the panel well, and that would fit. But to me, it's the art of the contrarian that's sort of a little more interesting than just what is a contrarian, because I've seen over 40 years of career in this city a lot of people who are just bluntly contrarian. They grow up that way. They like to be contrarian. It's nice to be a rebel. They like to go against the grain. Those people aren't here anymore, in general. It's the art of being a contrarian that makes it a little bit more interesting. Francis, I always love listening to Francis. He's the most interesting guy I know in the business. If you listen carefully to his 3 strategies, what he's doing, it makes extreme sense, every one of his strategies. But it's contrarian. It's against the grain. You have to really be prepared to gear up to wade in where others fear to go. And that's the point. Am I contrarian? Yeah, I probably am. I don't like to, I can give you 10 examples of when I remember growing up, I was different. People would flip a coin, the professor would say, if you flip a coin, it's going to be 50-50, heads or tails. Who would bet more than 50-50 to see the result if 25 times it came up heads, and I was that guy, And he looked at me and said, but it's still 50-50, you know that, statistically. And I said, I know, but I really want to see. The art of a contrarian is somebody who knows when to hold them and when to fold them, when to wade in where others fear to go, how to go in and gear up for risk and assesses risk correctly, is not stuck with just being a contrarian. Sometimes you go with the flow. Sometimes you go with the grain. Sometimes you go in the same direction as the crowd. But sometimes you don't. And to me, that's the art of it. It's not just being a contrarian. It's knowing when to be a contrarian and how.
Let me maybe go from a little different angle, and that is one of historical in nature. And I'll go back. I won't go back to all my years, but I'll go back to 1984 to 87. 1984 to 87, Francis, where are you? You were buying co-ops like crazy, right? 1984 to 87, I was selling to you those co-ops. And the reason I sold, and I'll let Francis explain why he bought, but the reason I sold was that the numbers that I was being offered as a multifamily owner of property were so crazy that I couldn't justify them from a cash flow point of view. And that word cash flow will be emphasized multiple times. They were sold at cap rates that only made sense for co-op converters to buy. And so, we sold a very large portion of our portfolio between 1984 and 1987. Fast forward to, by the way, the Tax Simplification Act, as accountants in the room here, of 1986 had a profound effect on our industry that our industry didn't really appreciate for a number of years. It basically caused some serious problems to our industry. The flip side, turn 180 degrees and look at post-1987, 88, 89, and you felt like it was a falling knife. You had to basically, where do you buy? The prices kept dropping, and it was pretty scary to buy. But if you sit back and say to yourself, my goodness, I'm buying loans at 30 cents on a dollar. I'm buying real estate literally by the pound. You have the guts to go ahead and do that, and you know that it doesn't come to an end. 1996, we all thought that the Internet was taking over the office market and there would be no need for offices anymore. Well, we were able to buy 110 Fifth Avenue for $100 a foot, and today we're approaching rents of $100 a foot at that building. So you have to look at patterns and understand that everything shouldn't, you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, or whatever. I don't say my expression's right, but you get the idea. And don't exaggerate in either direction. 2004 and to 2007 looked very much like 1984 through 1986 to us. Every time there's a different cause for a recession, but 2004, 2007 was frothy, just as today the times are frothy. So again, we stepped out of those markets by 2007, and we had sold like 50 assets in that market and waited for the downturn again. The next downturn, we bought land. We bought land in New York City for $100 a buildable foot. We bought land in Florida for $10 a buildable foot, and that candidly sustained us through the current times where we built on those lands. We built a couple thousand apartments in in New York and in Florida because we owned land at a cheap price. So what I'm really saying is that patterns, you look for the patterns. Be objective. Don't follow the herd. Most people in our industry are, it's a nation of sheep to some degree. We're herd mentality type players, and what everyone else is doing, we get comfort in that, and we do that ourselves. Don't do that. Sit back. Let the cash flow dictate whether you should be a buyer or seller. If you can figure out a way to stabilize at a number that you're satisfied with and you have the capacity to carry it, go for it. But if you don't, then sit back and wait for better times.
I started my contrarian career in 1993 when I left a firm called Jones Lang Wooten, and the real estate market there were a lot of dead bodies out there. And people thought I was crazy to go and start a business in 1993. And one of the things I learned was that it is very, very hard to be a contrarian when you have no money. It took a couple of years to get started, but ultimately I found money that was ready to invest in the real estate market. And we made a couple of investments. I think probably one of the most noteworthy, there were a couple, but 1500 Broadway we bought in 1995 when people thought we were crazy to be investing in Times Square. When we bought the Sylvan Lawrence portfolio, a number of people thought we were crazy to be buying a big building with 200,000 or 160,000 square foot floor plates. But I think being a contrarian comes out of seeing opportunity. So without the opportunity to buy the property, it's hard to be a contrarian. We didn't go and say, well, gee whiz, maybe we should be looking in Chelsea because tenants are looking for big floor plates. What happened was an opportunity came our way, and we had to justify why we would be buying a building with 200,000 square foot floor plates. But what we did is we did an analysis, and we looked on a macro basis about what was going on in the market, and then on a micro basis. And what we came to the conclusion that there were a lot of firms in the media and publishing business that were in various buildings and were looking to consolidate. And the first deal we did was with Deutsche Advertising, who was in 5 or 6 different buildings, and they consolidated onto one floor. We did the same thing with CCH, a legal publishing firm. They were in a number of buildings, and they consolidated onto one floor. So the thesis was proven to be accurate. I guess the deal that was most noteworthy was in 2005 when Prudential Securities, their lease expired. They did their printing on the 5th floor of 111 8th Avenue. Their lease expired, and this emerging company called Google was looking for space. And this was perfect for them. It was the kind of, it fit their culture. It was the kind of space that they were looking for, and they couldn't find it in Midtown Manhattan. So they moved into the building, and that kind of began the transformation, not only of 111 8th Avenue, but it kind of set a tone for the emerging TAMI tenants in the types of space that they were looking for. Google moved into this kind of building, and a lot of the other types of firms followed suit. So in short, it's a matter of looking at opportunities that come our way and figuring out how to make them work when other people may not have seen that type of strategy.
Francis was asked a question about his batting average, so none of us, I think, have a batting average of 1,000, but when the failures or the unsuccessful projects, and there weren't that many, because I think if you have too many in this business, you're not in business, but generally when I made the mistake of following the herd and got away from our core mission, our core business, it's been less successful and a couple of times unsuccessful. Not that I learn my lesson all the time, but you generally follow what you know. And I got into this business also, as Charlie said, with virtually no money and really a very short, unhappy law career, and got into the business, doing small market conversion in the early to mid '80s. When we saw the crash happening, and I think we saw this as well, there was an overinflated market. I think, again, what Mickey said is true. We didn't at the time understand the impact of the tax legislation, but what I did see was an opportunity in taking some of the social feelings I had about trying to do the right thing in certain communities we were in, somewhat of a vague feeling, but putting it into a business where we could make a profit, make money, and create affordable housing in the sort of realm of the '86 tax code, which created an opportunity for public-private partnerships. The tax credit, as opposed to government subsidies, became much more prominent, and we saw that as an opportunity. And it was a counter-cyclical opportunity. We saw the market going the wrong way. Banks weren't lending as much, and the place that there was opportunity both for financing and for development was in the affordable housing world. And we've kept with that theme on various levels, consistently changing and consistently looking at contrarian in our industry, contrarian opportunities. So as my industry becomes also a bunch, in some cases, sheep following the herd, we've tried to get out of that herd and look for opportunities that are somewhat different, whether it's bond financing, which came of age in the '90s, or mixed income housing, which came of age in the beginning of this century, or even mixed use, like the Essex Crossing project, where there's a lot of opportunity both in retail, commercial, and housing, and partnering with firms like Taconic, who had different expertise. Every 5-6 years, we've been looking to a contrarian point of view as to how to take our industry and our expertise and look at ways that others in that industry were not looking at, and really try to benefit and maximize those opportunities. And that's been the most successful opportunities that we've had as a business, where we could jump out of the herd and look around and say, what's the next wave going to be? And do it in a way that I don't think it's thumbing our nose at the experts necessarily, but saying, how can we look at what's out there and tweak it a bit and make it a path for success. So I think it's, in my view, it's more, the contrarian aspect is more tweaking the common path to make it slightly different.